Thank you for joining us this morning on our webinar on the real-time clock. Um, it's a relatively short one. It's only about just over 15 minutes. As usual, if you have any questions, don't be afraid to put them into the questions panel at any point throughout the webinar, and we'll get to them at the end. And I think we'll get started there.
Welcome to today's tutorial. Let's get started. Today we'll be talking about the OCS real-time calendar clock. We'll talk about how we access the real-time clock from the application, how we display time and date information on the screen, different ways that we can set the real-time clock, and we'll show some compare functions. As always, we'll finish with a live Q&A session. The OCS real-time clock is built into nearly every OCS controller. The accuracy of our clock ranges from a few seconds per month to maybe about a minute per month. You can access the real-time clock from your application, which has functionality that's desired in many cases. There are many ways that you can update the clock. Let's discuss the clock's applications. Data logging is a common application. Data logging relies heavily on the real-time clock and its timestamp. It's important that the time and date accurately reflect when the logs occurred. Lighting control is another application. You may want lights to turn on or off at certain times or start dimming in the evenings. There are many other applications, such as real-time clock scheduling, production reports, etc. Now let's discuss features of the real-time clock. First, you've got local time and date, and the ability to set your time zone for automatic updates of the clock. You can also set a daylight savings time flag. There's no universal way to set daylight savings, so we provide a flag that can be manually manipulated with logic. We also support Coordinated Universal Time, or UTC, which is the functional equivalent of Greenwich Mean Time. You can access the time and date information from the application through System Register. The OCS has many system bits and registers that are accessible at runtime, which provide many functions, including access to time and date from the real-time clock. We offer system registers for local time, which are in the LSR44 range, as well as system registers for the UTC time, which are up in the 200s. With Advanced Ladder, we've pre-named the variables for time and date. Here are the time and date system variables. On the left, there's a list of the local time system registers. There are 3 registers that deal with time, starting with seconds, followed by minutes, and then hour. There are also 3 registers that deal with date, starting with day, followed by month, and then year. There's a day of the week system register, which is automatically calculated by the OCS. Local time is what you'll use in your logic and on screen. In addition to local time on the left, you've got UTC time on the right. You've got a very similar set of system registers available for universal time. Starting with system register 212, you can see the same 6 registers in terms of content for time and date. But there are 2 extra registers, 210 and 211. They're used for time zone as well as the daylight savings time flag. They're the only parameters that are read-write, everything else is read-only. There are ways of setting time locally from the screen or from the system menu, but it takes a special procedure, whereas the time zone and the daylight savings time flags can be read or written at any time. So those are the system variables, which are accessible at any point inside your application, whether you're talking about ladder logic or displaying things on the screen. When we want to display time and date on the screen, instead of having separate data fields, it's a lot more convenient to take advantage of the actual time display object, which is available from the graphics editor in Cscape. Anytime that you are referencing time, you want to reference the seconds value from the real-time clock. And remember, there are 3 consecutive time values in the system registers. So if you're displaying time using the time display object, you want to reference the seconds field, which is the first register. If you're displaying date, you want to reference the day of the month field, which is also the first register. Now let's look at a demonstration for using the time display object. We're in Cscape now. I'm going to show you how to display time and date on screen. Let's take a look at our variables. I have a program here based around the tag-based ladder, or variable-based ladder as we call it. And let's look at the time and date variables from the real-time clock. With our variable-based ladder, we predefined the variables for date and time, and they're all listed here alphabetically. When we want to display time on the screen, we reference seconds. And when we want to display date, we reference day. So let's go to the screen editor now. I've got an XL4 here, and I've placed 4 of these time display property windows here. The first 2 are displaying local time and date. The last 2 are displaying the universal time and date. Down here, I've got some separate data fields for the time zone and the daylight savings flag. I'm going to double click here under local time. I'm pointing at the seconds variable, and I have a choice of many ways I can display time data. I'm going to stick with hours, minutes, seconds, and military time here. I'll point at the date register now. Again, there's a variety of different formats to choose from for displaying date. I'm showing my local time as well as universal time. Let's see what it looks like. Okay, we have this display on the screen, but the time and date are wrong. Later on, I'm going to show you how to set the time and date to the proper values. Next, let's talk about the different methods of setting time and date. There are 4 different ways we can do that. We can set it from our PC in Cscape. We can set it from the system menu. We can use something called network time protocol, or we can use function blocks and logic. You'll start by setting your time zone. That's the number of minutes plus or minus from Greenwich Mean Time. Next, we'll either set or clear the daylight savings flag. I'm going to set our daylight savings flag to be on. Then you want to set your local time and date. We don't set the UTC time and date because customers set up local time in the OCS. After the local time is set, the day of the week and UTC are automatically calculated. Okay, so that's the general process that is followed. Now let's do a demonstration on setting the clock from the system menu, from Cscape, and using network time protocol. Alright, let's start by setting the time and date from the system menu. I'll open the system menu and now I'll select set time and date. The first thing I'm going to do is set my time zone. I am 1 hour ahead of Greenwich Mean Time, so I'm going to scroll down, hit enter for time zone. We're using Central European Time for this example. Okay, so I've set my time zone at +1 hour. Now I'm going to set my daylight savings flag. I'll scroll down to daylight savings, hit enter, and switch it to yes. Now if we have a look back at our screen, you'll see that the time zone and the daylight savings flags are set properly. The time is still way off, so I'll go back into the system menu and select set time and date. I'll hit enter under time and change the hour from 7 PM to 4 PM. I'll scroll down to date, hit enter, and change it to the 14th of July. As you can see, the OCS knows what day of the week it is. And if we go back out of here to the screen, my local time is shown as 4:39. My date is showing as the 14th of July, and my time zone is at +60, which equates to an hour. Next, I'll show you how to set up time and date from Cscape. I'll switch to Cscape. I have to make sure that I'm communicating with my controller. As you can see in the lower right hand corner here, local 253, target 253 are, so I'm online and communicating. In the controller pull down menu, there is a view set clock option. Okay, so from the view set clock option, if I were to press this button, it would take the current time on my local PC and download that to the OCS. If I press this button below that, it would take the settings from down here, which I manually type in, and it would download those to the OCS. I'm going to set the system time from here. I'll just switch back to the OCS. We adjusted the current time from what I set it before. I was off by 15 or 20 seconds probably, but now it's about a couple of seconds at most. Now I'll show you how to set the clock using Network Time Protocol, or NTP, which is the most useful way. Let's go back into Cscape and go under the hardware configuration. NTP is an Ethernet based protocol, so we'll go under LAN 1 configuration here. Before you can use Network Time Protocol, you have to ensure that your network is set up properly. Your IP address and netmask have to be set up right. If you're going to be accessing a time server that is outside of your building, you need to ensure that the gateway is properly configured, and you should make sure that you have a DNS server configured. In my case, I've configured one of the Google DNS servers here. So with these two things properly configured, we now have the ability to go outside of our building to get time for synchronization purposes. Now that we've done that, we can take a look at the resident protocols and see NTP protocol is available on the list. It basically is getting the clock from a web-based server. Your IT department can set up an internal NTP server inside of your firewall. If your IT department does that, then you can use NTP to synchronize the time on your units from an internal server where you're not accessing the internet. Once we have NTP configured, we hit the Configure Selected Protocol button here. This is where we can add a list of one or more network time servers that we want to reference. In my case, I usually use one that's called ie.pool.ntp.org. Alright, I'll say OK. And with that configured, I can go ahead and download that to the OCS. Let's go back to the OCS real quick. Let's screw up the time a little bit so we can tell when we've changed it using NTP. We're going back to the system menu and going to quickly change the time to something that's way off. I've changed the time so that it is wildly inaccurate. Let's go back into Seascape and do a download. I'll download the program here. Alright, so Seascape will figure out what has changed. Let's switch back to our OCS. It's already changed, so that happened super fast. The time is accurate. Now notice when you do the NTP, it only is going to affect the time and the date. You have to handle time zone and daylight savings flag independently of network time protocol. The OCS accesses the NTP server on power up, and then on occasion every few hours after that. So that was a demonstration on setting the clock. The last method for setting time and date is through the setTime function block. It allows you to configure a list of 6 consecutive register values that contain the new time and date settings as the input to the function block. If you're using register-based ladder, you're going to use 6 consecutive %R registers, making sure that the data is in the appropriate order. Those are seconds, followed by minutes, then hour, followed by date, month, then year. If you're using variable-based ladder, or IEC 61131, you can set up a variable as an array, or a dimension variable with a dimension of 6, so that those 6 values for seconds, minutes, hours, date, month, year can be consecutive indexes. You can use this function block in conjunction with a screen to provide an easy way for your operator to access and change the time and the date manually. Now I'll demonstrate how to set up the setTime function block. We're in Seascape. I'm using variable-based ladder, so I have a single normally open contact. When it's enabled, it's enabling the setClock function block. I'll double click on it here, and the input to my setClock function block is a single array that has a dimension of 6, which contains what I'm calling the new time. Once again, that is the seconds, minutes, hour, date, month, and year that I'm going to be setting the clock to. Let's create a screen that gives the operator the ability to enter in a new time and a new date, and these utilize the time-date display objects. I'll double click here. We're talking about the time now. We're going to reference seconds, and seconds is the very first entry in this array of 6 objects. So it's important that we reference the appropriate member of that array. And then for date, we want to reference the 4th member of that array, because we have 3 that deal with time. So you can see number 3 is our index. Remember, indexes for arrays start from 0. Okay, so we've set this up for our user. They can enter this information in here. When they're done with that, they'll press the set button, which is tied to the enabling contact in my logic. Now let's show my OCS. Let's say I'm going to change the time to 5:20. I'm also going to change the date to the 9th of July. Once I've got those done, I'm going to hit the set button. And as you can see, it's changed. If I didn't have this function block working in the background, then it wouldn't work. Now I'll demonstrate setting the daylight savings flag in logic. I'm going to use time and date operations to detect the second Sunday in March and the first Sunday in November, which is when daylight savings changes in Ireland, so that I can turn the daylight savings flag on and off at those times. So I'll click on this month of the year function block, and I'm looking for a fixed time. It's set to March, which means if it's March, it's going to pass power flow. Next, I'll click on the day of the week function block. I'm checking to see if it's Sunday. So if it's Sunday, and if it's March, it's going to pass power flow. Once I've done that, I'm going to click on the day of the month function block. I'm looking for the second Sunday in March. That means it can be anywhere from the 8th through the 14th. So if it's the second Sunday in March, it'll pass PowerFlow. Let me click on the time of day function block here. The time is set to 1 AM, which is when daylight savings changes. We're going to use this set coil to set our flag. So at 1 o'clock, we'll pass PowerFlow to this coil, and we'll stop passing PowerFlow to the coil at 1:01. Now we want this to be our daylight savings time flag. I've already set up a variable that's mapped the appropriate system register for the daylight savings flag. I've copy and pasted this rung of logic so that I can set the second date which daylight savings changes at. I'll click on the month of the year function block, and I'm going to change the month from March to November. I've already changed the day in the day of the month function block so that it selects the first Sunday of November. So that was setting up the daylight savings flag in logic. Thank you for attending today's tutorial. The Q&A session will begin shortly.
Okay, that was that. Nice and short this morning. Let's see if we have any questions in. Do all controllers support NTP? No, not all. The XL series from the XL4 up and the RCCs support it, but not the RTC 6512. The X5 also supports it, but the other micro OCS series do not. Are these registers predefined in standard ladder? No. So you'll have to tag the system register addresses in that. Is there anything else coming in? Where can we access these system registers? So all system registers you can access in the help file of Cscape. They'll be covered there entirely. So yeah, if you'd like to see all of them, you can just go to the help file in Cscape. That looks to be it for questions at the moment. I'll take you back to my screen like always, and we'll show you what is happening in our upcoming webinars. So we have integrating stepper motors and wiring in the micro OCS controllers coming up in the next 2 weeks. I see a lot of you have already signed up for those, which is great. And it's great that you're coming back every week. We love to see it. But yeah, anyone that hasn't signed up for these yet, please do so. We'd love to have you with us. As always, previous webinars can be watched down below. I just have one more question. And can you change time and date from the phone app? In what sense? If you have it set up for a button press for changing time, yes. I might just follow up with you after just to clear up exactly what you mean on that question. Other than that, I think that's all the questions. And yeah, we will have more topics for webinars coming up. We'll probably be updating our list in the next couple of days to a week or so. So you'll see the following webinars after the next 2 weeks as well. Thank you for joining us this morning, and we hope to see you again.